Jon Voight, you've never kept your politics quiet. You used to be a liberal, a loud, active liberal. Before I get to how you became a conservative, how did you come to liberalism?
Well, it was a very destructive time, the 60s, just out of school. And, I mean, think of the mantra of the 60s for the young people: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What a recipe for chaos, you know. Really destructive time in many ways. And all of this energy from the youth, you know, I believe that there were forces at work at that time that were from the left. That means, you know, Karl Marx, communism, progressivism, which was a word that they invented to hide their communism for a while, and that stuck, and so socialism. These forces, many forces, invaded that decade, taking advantage of this disruption with the assassination of John Kennedy. We were in trauma. The country was in trauma, and then we had, at the end, at 1968, we had the deaths of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Great people that we cared a great deal for. So in that time, there were people who, the Vietnam War erupted in that time. And there were many folks against that war that were charismatic people from our industry. And as I was auditioning to get in this industry and working hard to become an actor, I fell in with that group of people, and I was swept away with the propaganda. And one of the pieces of propaganda that I bought at that time, and when you're involved in propaganda, I have to say, there are no doors out of it in a certain sense, because if your friends are there, this and that, and you make associations, and you pass these sound bites back and forth and all of this. So I understand what's going on in Hollywood today. I understand it. I was right there, you know. And those people are focused on their work too. They're trying to just get a job. So it's convenient for them to be, you know, politically aligned too. So I was one of those guys, and I believed what I had been ingesting. And one of the things was that the war in Vietnam was really our problem. That if we removed ourselves from it, that the south of Vietnam and the north of Vietnam, the communists under Ho Chi Minh, would come together and embrace as brothers, as family. And I bought some of that, and I was in the streets, you know, against the war and that stuff. And then what happened? Then the people in the streets, and by the way, you know, we never lost, our military never lost a battle in that war. And we were on the way to the defeat of the North. But the real energy that closed out that possibility was those people in the street. And they certainly weren't the majority of Americans. But they were very effective. It's like what's going on now. They have a march. They've prepared an army of people to go out and speak and make noise. And you would think, if you were watching television, this must be the American people. But it isn't. But anyway, and they brought down the war. It came to a close. And we pulled out of Vietnam. We pulled out of Vietnam. And what happened? Was there this embrace? Was there this celebration? No. 2.5 million people were murdered in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam because of our absence. And what happened with the left when they saw that? It's the signature of the left. They create this, you know, this chaos and horror, and they walk away. They take no responsibility for it. That's what happened to all my buddies. They celebrated. We won the war. We won it. We won our war. And there was this bloodbath. I remember Joan Baez had a little piece in the paper, and it was the only single voice from all of the left, and she was ridiculed for it or put aside for it. And I thought to myself, she's right. And we were wrong.
That's the turning point.
That was the turning point. And it took a long time because propaganda is dangerous. It gets into our system.
It's reinforcing.
Yes, it is. And it took me a long while to pull completely out of it. But little by little I did. And then I saw that the answer, much like Reagan, when he said, you know, the Democratic Party, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. Well, to some degree, I have to say the same thing happened to me or anybody who's a conservative now and was at that time on the other side. Because when you look at, let's say, John Kennedy's inaugural address, his inaugural address would be deemed today by the people who were in Hollywood, and my friends in Hollywood, and the people over the country who are on the left, as some radical nut from the Republican Party. We simply have lost something along the way, but it hasn't been our own fault. We've been attacked by an insidious and I would say evil force. And I've traced that, and I know a little bit about it. So I know what the battle is. The battle has been raging, and it's re-emerged in this century in full force, and that's what we're dealing with right now.
When we come back, I want to ask you about this conservatism.
Yeah.
You're a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
You were a very early supporter of the current president, Donald Trump.
You bet.
And I want to know what you saw that triggered you to be such an early supporter. We'll be right back.
Live from America's News Headquarters, I'm Marianne Rafferty. A major shakeup at CBS. The TV network announcing that Leslie Moonves will depart as chairman, president, and CEO effective immediately. It follows several allegations of sexual misconduct that spanned much of his career. The allegations came from 12 women in 2 New Yorker articles by reporter Ronan Farrow. CBS has been investigating the allegations against Moonves since they were made public in August. And Hurricane Florence gaining strength as it moves toward the U.S. coast. It became a hurricane earlier today, packing maximum winds of 85 miles per hour. It could be a Category 4 storm before making expected landfall later this week somewhere in the Carolinas. The University of North Carolina at Wilmington is urging students to leave, announcing canceled classes. I'm Marianne Rafferty. Now back to Life, Liberty, and Levin.
So, Jon Voight, the Vietnam War had a big impact on you. You went from being a leftist, basically, to a conservative, to a Trump supporter, right?
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, just going back to that moment, you know, in time, I look back on that moment when I realized that we were responsible for all that bloodshed, that the people in the streets really had that kind of power. And I feel, and I've said this to people, I've said, I have blood on my hands from that. I understand. That was a moment in time when I was out of line, and I had to make up so much, you know. And I feel that, you know, I feel that way. So I'm not going back to that. And today, I've come a long way, and I've had a lot of fun, I must say. You know, one of the great joys of my life is my relationship to the military, and patriotism brings you many beautiful friends. I'm very close to the first responders of 9/11, and so I'm a person at peace. So when people come at me from my own area of the world and say those things, that maybe I would have said way back. I understand them completely. I feel sorry. I feel sad for them and sad for us. And I know that we have to keep focus and keep battling for what is true. And this is and things will change because the truth will prevail.
So how did you become a early Trump supporter? What did you see in candidate Trump?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First of all, there were 17 guys with him, right? They were all very top fellas, bright, very bright fellas, very capable. And I don't know if there's ever been such a legion of very, very good, righteous folks on this one stage together. But I looked at the world and what was left after the past years, and the world was in chaos. Terrorism had swept across the world. Because the cat was away, the big cat of the United States had been sidelined, the rats were at play. And so you had North Korea making these gestures to endanger their neighbors. You had Iran sponsoring terrorism across the globe with Hezbollah and Hamas and their other, and we had this situation in Syria where we watched without responding to 500,000 people being murdered in Syria. So it was this, you needed someone who had tremendous strength and someone who could see clearly now what the damage was that was going on and what had to be addressed. And you needed somebody who was a doer, somebody who solved problems, who got up in the morning to solve problems, right? And many of them at that stage were like that. And then on the home front, we had terrible joblessness, a failing economy, a civil war, really, too. So much going on. So I'm looking. I'm like a casting director in a film. I'm looking. Who's the guy that could handle this, right? And as I watched, and I saw what Donald Trump was pointing to, and the courage, maybe not courage, just clarity. This immigration situation, which had to be addressed and it wasn't addressed for years. And by the way, all this tumult that they're trying to create, if you listen to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, they said the same things about immigration. He's getting blamed. They're trying to make him a racist for saying the exact same things, right? But the difference with Donald Trump and those folks, he's going to do something about it. And as I saw him, focusing on just the clear common sense of our trade deals and our dealings with it, he said, we're going to have politicians sitting down with these people negotiating treaties. This was an eye-opener for me because, yeah, of course they've negotiated nothing. They begged for money, but they haven't negotiated anything. They're not tough negotiators. They're not card players. They don't see what's going on the other side of the table. That kind of thing, right?